Hey guys, and happy Valentine's Day. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. In my most recent Q&A, I made reference to Harry Houdini and his sort of belief in spiritualism. And I sort of broad stroked the subject. I got a couple of small wires crossed when I mentioned it. So I went back to the subject, and it's honestly so interesting. I mean, he's back and forth with spiritualism, his friendship with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, his wife Bess. It's all so fascinating and definitely warranted a video all of its own. So with that said, guys, let's talk about Harry Houdini. Now, most of us know Harry Houdini as an illusionist stunt performer, probably best known for his escape acts, escaping from handcuffs underwater, straitjackets, things like that. He and his wife Bess, who he met in 1894, met and married, basically just travelled America and Europe, just performing these awe-inspiring illusions and acts, just baffling people worldwide. Some people were so in awe, in fact, that they believed that there was some mystical arts involved in the illusions that he was performing. Despite denying it, that reputation was building. Sound very familiar to people like Derren Brown, who do pretty much the same thing now. Their mentalism tricks are so far out of comprehension sometimes that the only explanation you can have, despite denying it, is that there must be some kind of psychic ability there. Now, in his later part of his career, he actually became known for debunking and sort of exposing fraudulent mediums. And this is where the accounts differ, is where his interest in the spiritualism actually originally lied. Now, experts in Houdini, Houdini purists will tell you that he hands down never believed in spiritualism in any form. He was always out to expose and to debunk. However, I have read accounts that state otherwise, that in actual fact his original interest came from a very real, very genuine curiosity in the subject. Now, Houdini himself apparently wrote that the loss of his mother in 1913 was what set him in search of a genuine medium. Now, it doesn't detract from the fact that his knowledge of illusions and trickery and stage performances would always hold him back from 100% believing it, no matter how accurate a prediction or a seance might be. In 1920, he met Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes, probably the most rational thinker in all of fiction. Arthur Conan Doyle was actually a huge believer in spiritualism, often attending and hosting seances himself. Now, it is argued that Houdini, for the sake of that friendship, sort of feigned openness to spiritualism, probably more than he actually believed, to protect that friendship and to keep things sweet, including in 1923 when Doyle's wife Jean hosted a seance in which she used automatic writing to write down messages from Houdini's mother. Now, it must have been difficult, if you don't believe it, during that session to keep your mouth shut and to not say anything, because that's very personal, The Doyles believed that he was very moved by the situation, so, his poker face was brilliant, because not long after, he released a statement saying that he didn't believe that the pages that were written down were actually from his mother, that he didn't believe it was actually genuine, not least of all because it was all written in very grammatical English, and his mother's English was apparently terrible, his words, not mine. And so this sort of created a bit of a rift between them, which only got worse when Houdini basically set about a crusade, as I say, in his later career, of debunking and exposing fraudulent mediums, some of which Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was actually a huge follower and believer of. And so as he started to expose these mediums, the friendship just completely broke down. Now, Harry Houdini passed away on Halloween night 1926 at the age of just 52. But before he passed, he made a promise to Bess that if it was possible to pass on a message from the other side, to actually pierce that veil and to deliver a message via a medium from the other side, that is exactly what he would do. Now, the two of them got together using a secret code. They created a message that only the two of them knew, so that if a medium would pass that on, that would stand as definitive proof that it was possible and that Harry Houdini had in fact spoken from beyond the grave. And this sort of brings us on to probably one of the most intriguing and probably heartbreaking portions of the Harry Houdini story, because after his passing, Bess spent years searching for a medium that was able to speak to Harry. She held seances often. Halloween Houdini seances became a tradition, and people came and went, and nobody was successful until 1928, when Arthur Ford, quite a well-known psychic in America at the time, came forward with a message, not from Houdini, but from his mother, saying the word forgive. Now, Bess knew Harry well. She knew his family history, and there had been an incident in which he had fallen out with his brother and refused to forgive him unless his mother said so. And that was the one thing, apparently, that he wanted to hear from his mother. Through all those seances before, trying to communicate with her, that's what he wanted to hear. And so for Arthur Ford to come forward and say, forgive, it got her attention. And so a year later, Ford came forward with a message from Houdini himself, and it was using the secret code, a sequence of words that spelled out the words Rosabelle, believe. Now, Rosabelle itself is very significant because it's the word written inside Bess's wedding ring, and is the title of a popular song that she sang during her own act when Houdini and her met. And the message was correct. Like, Arthur Ford had nailed it. He'd cracked the Houdini code. Like, his publicity went through the roof. She endorsed it. She was like, he is passed on the message. Houdini has spoken from the grave. But she was actually urged to retract that endorsement and the reward, because it turned out that the code that they'd used was actually a magician's code that they'd devised for a mind reading act years before, that actually appeared in a biography about Houdini that was available to everybody. Not only that, but the name Rosabelle, like that significance could have been learnt from a family and friend, anything. I mean, decades later, Arthur Ford himself was exposed as a fraud because he basically kept extensive files on everybody that he did a reading for. So it stands to reason that he absolutely could have just done some research, figured out that code, figured out the significance of Rosabelle, and just used that to convince Bess. After she retracted her endorsement of Ford's message, Bess did continue to hold seances in the hopes of speaking to Harry Houdini one more time. No longer about the code or the message or proving life after death. She just wanted to speak to her husband again. And so the years went on, attempt after attempt failed, and her hopes of ever speaking to him again began to fade. And then on Halloween night 1936, they held one last official Houdini seance in which her and a few close friends and fellow magicians got together and attempted to communicate. And they tried everything, using trigger objects, some handcuffs, like chalk and slate and bells, everything that they could throw at it to try and summon him forth. And they just couldn't do it. For over an hour they tried, and they just didn't get anything. And so in the end, Bess had to put out a statement that said it has been 10 long years of trying to communicate, but she no longer had any hope that it was possible for him to speak from the other side, ending her statement with, "Good night, Harry." And so that brings us to the end of the core Harry Houdini spiritualist story. To this day, people still hold seances on Halloween, spiritualist mediums, people across the world, in an attempt to speak to Harry Houdini. But that core story, that core journey through spiritualism and his relationship with Bess and her attempts to speak to him for 10 years after his passing, I thought was so tragically beautiful that it just warranted sharing in a video. And I know it's very different from the usual type of content that I do, but I do hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to know your guys' opinion on it. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I'll post any and all activity as and when I get it.